Barrierefrei aufgerollt. Kurz, kompakt und leicht verständlich.
Welcome to our radio show Barrierefrei aufgerollt by BIZEPS Center for Independent Living. I am Katharina Mühlebner. Today we would like to introduce you to Yetnebersh Nigussie, a 35-year-old disability rights advocate and lawyer from Ethiopia. For a long time she has been fighting for the rights of people with disabilities. In 2017 she was awarded with the Right Livelihood Award for her ongoing commitment. Nigussie went blind at the age of 5. Her activism started at a very early age. In school she led the student council. During her time in university, she co-founded and led a female student council. Yetnebersh Nigussie also co-founded the Ethiopian National Disability Action Network. Since 2016, she's working for the Vienna-based NGO Light for the World. In today's interview, she gives us a brief glimpse at her life and her career. Please introduce yourself to our listeners. Who are you and where are you from?
My name is Yetnebersh Nigussie, and currently I'm working as a senior disability inclusion advisor in Light for the World. I am originally from Ethiopia, but I work now globally.
What do you do for a living?
I am a lawyer with a disability, so I am employed in Light for the World as their inclusion advisor. So I do full-time advocacy on disability and rights of persons with disabilities.
What kind of projects are you currently working on?
I do work on a number of initiatives that Light for the World is supporting. That includes on a number of community-based rehabilitation programs that we run in different developing countries, in more than 17 countries in the world. I also participate in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as in the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
How do you feel about winning the Right Livelihood Award?
Well, I think it's a great achievement to win the Right Livelihood Award because it's also very prestigious and it brings you together with other very prominent laureates who have done a lot for their community, for the world. The reason I won it was on my innovative approach to call for inclusion instead of specialized services for persons with disabilities in Ethiopia.
Is there any support for people with disabilities in Ethiopia?
Yeah, there are a number of supports for people with disabilities in Ethiopia. Most of the supports come from the families because government do not have a lot of support services for them. So families mostly render the support services that people with disabilities need, including if they want to go to work, including if they want to go to school. So families are supposed to provide services. However, there are also supports that the people with disabilities get more from the community, as the social security system is not very strong in Ethiopia. The government tries to support in some ways, like provision of prostheses, orthopedics, and also free access to schools and so on and so forth. But most of the supports that people with disabilities get in Ethiopia are either from the community or from their families.
What is the current situation for people with disabilities in your home country?
Well, still people with disabilities lead an undignified life, and they are mostly hidden in their houses, not having access to basic services in their community, including education, health, livelihood, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, there are some encouraging legal reforms happening, including formulation of policies after the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities ratification. But there is still a long way to go to really achieve full and effective inclusion for persons with disabilities.
For women with disabilities, is it especially difficult to achieve education or to get a job?
Yes, definitely. Women with disabilities are double discriminated or double disadvantaged in Ethiopia as well as in quite so many countries because disability movements mostly are headed by male figures. So women with disabilities tend to be only very, very low profile in there. We don't see them becoming leaders. They also are excluded from the mainstreamed women's movement, from the feminism movement, because there is also a misunderstanding there that the issue of women with disabilities should be handled by the disability movement. So they tend to be excluded from both. And this is not only in my country, Ethiopia, but also if you see globally, for example, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Committee has got 18 members, out of which only one is a woman. So this reflects the fact that women with disabilities are far, far left behind, both in the disability as well as in the women's movement, in the feminism movement. This is also confirmed in the World Disability Report, where it clearly shows that there are more women with disabilities than men, but access-wise, the women has quite less access than their male counterparts.
Can you describe the situation for women with disabilities in Ethiopia?
In Ethiopia, women with disabilities are among those less educated. For example, if you talk about education, only 4% of children with disabilities are in school, and out of them, less than 1% are women and girls with disabilities. As you know, less education would lead to less access to other services, including health, employment, livelihood, justice, etc. So women with disabilities still lead a very undignified life, and they don't often go to school for a number of reasons, including parents becoming overprotective about their girls with disabilities. They also, in the meantime, witness a lot of violences as they are not empowered and they don't claim their rights. They get raped by strangers as well as people in the house, because mostly they remain in the house. And even in times where the violence has been committed against them, access to justice is very far, because they don't have an assistive device. They cannot go to the police station, or they can, even though they go there, but they don't have a sign language interpreter to explain what they really want to say. And this and other barriers prevent them from fully enjoying their rights.
You told us it is very hard for women with disabilities in Ethiopia, but you are very well educated. Why are you an exception?
I would think it was because of the strength of my mother, who decided to send me to a special school then, because there were no regular schools taking blind children. So many parents have decided to keep their children in their house because they don't want to send them very far. The fact that I was given the opportunity to learn and also the fact that I used that opportunity very well brought me to the level of success I am in today. And I believe that that's the secret. I call education as my liberator in life, and it was only through education that I got independent life. So it depends on the consciousness of your family and the steps that they take to get you where you should be.
How did your disability influence your life?
It totally influenced my life. For example, I was born in a rural area where early marriage was exercised, like girls were married when they were 11 and 10. So when I turned blind at the age of 5, I was no more wanted to become married. So I was considered unfit for that community. So that brought me out of that community because I was not needed, I was not fit. And then I got education, and through that I became who I am. In general, all my work, including my advocacy work, are highly influenced by my disability. because I base those arguments based on the evidence that I have, based on the experience that I face every day. So I could say that disability has strongly influenced my life.
You told us that you were seen as unfit to marry. Are you married now?
Yes, I am married now and have got 2 daughters. And it's different when you are educated, when you are employed, you have more chance to marry. You can win the prejudice, you can win the myths, the assumptions that people have about your disability.
Are there any events in your life that influenced you the most?
Yeah, I could say that the time where I joined the integrated school in grade 7, as the special schools were unable to take me after that, had influenced me a lot, because until then I never knew that I was different from others. I never knew that my ability was challenged or my ability was questioned by other people. So when I joined the integrated school, in a classroom full of 76 students, I had no friend. In a classroom where people fight to share a desk for 4 students, I was owning 1 desk alone, because really children did not find it easy and acceptable to play with me, to learn with me. So that taught me a lot of experience as to how other people view as persons with disabilities, and that's when I decided that exclusion or special institutions were not really the right place to start life, as you miss out both from being included, as well as also other children without disabilities miss out from being exposed and playing together and growing together with their peers with disabilities. Then that led me to remain a lifelong inclusion advocate.
Why did you become a disability rights advocate?
I think it's mainly because of my own experience of exclusion. I couldn't be anybody else. All the barriers I have overcome, I thought should not remain barriers also for others, because we're not the beginners of disability movement. There were a lot of challenges in the previous days. People with disabilities being put together and being burned in fire, that they're not needed, or they were kept out of the city. That way they're not seen by other communities. So other disability activists before us have struggled this, and they have somehow overcome some barriers for us to be able to pass, to enjoy what we can. And I really feel that we have the responsibility of also overcoming more barriers and removing more barriers and creating a barrier-free world for the coming generation with disabilities, because it's very difficult to stop disability. It's an evolving concept, and it was there when human being was there, and it will continue to live. So what we have to do is to work on a world which is livable by all.
You started to be politically active at a very young age. How did people react to this, and what were your biggest achievements?
My first modes of activism were through a music band, where I used to sing as a singer to raise awareness in different workshops and events that were organized to raise awareness. There I recognized that I have talents to show for the people, which is against their attitude. That I have no ability, I have no talent to contribute. Rather, all they saw was that I'm blind and I cannot do anything. Because I cannot see, I cannot do anything. The biggest achievements, I would say, in those days of activism were mainly the establishment of the Center for the Students with Disabilities in Addis Ababa University, the university I came from. It was a big thing, because most of the time the issue of disability looks to be more sympathetic. People look to be more sympathetic, but they lack ownership. They lack institutions to handle it. So it was so great in a very old, more than 50 years old university, where they had trained more than thousands of students with disabilities. There was no single institution which was responsible for handling the issue of students with disabilities. So that was the first achievement I would call in terms of having disability formal structure in the university. Then, based on that experience, I co-founded the Ethiopian Center for Disability and Development, which is still serving as a center for working on disability and development in the country, and which is also a partner of Light for the World now. I think that was a big achievement because it was people always put both disability and development in silos. So trying to bring those two big elements together and working on or showing development actors how they can become disability inclusive was something that I devoted my life for nearly around 11 years. And I have seen a lot of successfully inclusive organizations who have managed to change both their organization as well as their programs. So I would call that as also a big achievement.
Do you have any role models or people in your life that inspire you?
I have a lot of role models, but I was initially inspired by the work of Mother Teresa, growing in a special Catholic school. I grew up reading and listening more stories about the work of Mother Teresa. So I always tried to focus on tackling invisibility, and I always tried to make sure that I was needed in the community. For the greatest need, I think, is to be needed by somebody else. So I kept on contributing for the community. But I get my inspirations from a number of sources, including even rural mothers of children with disabilities. You see, you don't only learn from professors and big figures in the country, but you also learn from a striving woman, a poor woman in a community, as she also have her own wisdom of tackling her problems.
As a woman with disability, what was it like in school or in university?
It was not easy. For example, in the university, I was among the very first blind female who joined law school. There were already stereotypes about what women should and can do. So for a long time in history in Ethiopia, blind people have been lawyers, but that looked a reserved area only for blind males. So trying to join law school, fighting against the prejudice that blind women cannot go to such a department requiring a lot of effort was a big thing. So I'm happy that I succeeded to graduate, and now more blind women have already joined and graduated in that law school. Moreover, even for non-disabled girls, it was not easy in the university, as the university was highly, again, male-dominated, and all the systems were very gender blind. So I succeeded in co-founding the first the Female Students Association and served as the first president in Addis Ababa University. So yeah, it's really challenging for the situation for women and girls with disabilities, even in the schools. Teachers even get surprised when girls succeed better results than boys, because the assumption is that boys are there to achieve better than girls, and girls are supposed to stay home and taking care of their siblings as well as supporting their mothers in house chores.
Do you think that the situation in Ethiopia has changed since your childhood?
Yeah, it has definitely changed. But the question is the change to the extent what's needed? Otherwise, for example, when I was a child, as I told you, no children with disabilities were allowed in regular schools. Now the policy has changed, and every school has to take in every child with a disability. For example, during my time, there were no laws guaranteeing employment rights for persons with disabilities. Now we have those employment laws. At least policy-wise, we have a lot of improvements, and still there are, you see better number of educated persons with disabilities who make it also to job and to different universities. This is a change, but compared to the population, we have 17.6% of our population have a disability, and Ethiopia is a huge country having around 100 million people. So it's like a drop in an ocean.
After all this time, do you consider yourself to be a role model for people with disabilities?
Yes, I do consider myself as a role model for quite so many persons with disabilities, and I hear that also through different avenues, including medias, as well as a number of interactive meetings that I had. I think it takes a long way to come all this way and becoming an international figure to alleviate disability-based discrimination. Yeah, and I confirm that when I do home visits for our community-based rehabilitation programs, that parents are so excited to see me, and then they tell me that I'm their hope to make for them to overcome all the challenges that their children with disabilities are facing, because they would think that their children with disabilities will be like me if they overcome, if they educate, or if they do whatever they are supposed to do.
What are the most important goals you want to accomplish for people with disabilities?
I think the most important goals for persons with disabilities to achieve in future would be the same like the others. I would think the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are of interest for persons with disabilities, and because of the overarching principles that they carry, which is leaving no one behind, I would hope that they would also be achieved for all persons with disabilities. But in terms of priority, I would really say that inclusive and quality education would be a great priority, because this is an investment on the future generation to play, learn, and grow together. And this would also be instrumental in breaking the cycle of poverty, and a generation which has educated and which has grown together, playing and learning together, will not have a problem living together later on, will not have a problem working together later on. So I would wish that investing more on inclusive and quality education ensures a future inclusive society.
Do you think that it's important to have centers for independent living?
No, I think it's important to advocate for independent living, normally the concept of independent living is different in Europe than the one we talk about in Ethiopia, because in quite so many African countries, including Ethiopia, we don't have a lot of institutions. Rather, people are kept in house. So the question in the global south becomes about being included in the community. So like they are there in their houses, but they're not out because there are no facilities in place for them. They don't have assistive devices. They don't have the support services which will take them to the community. Whereas in Europe, as you know, quite so many of the governments push towards institutional living arrangements for persons with disabilities. So I believe, independent living and being included in a community are important causes to struggle for. And I think that's the base for quite so many other rights to be enjoyed by persons with disabilities.
What are you going to do with the prize money of the Right Livelihood Award?
Yes, 50% of my award money will be used to support the One Class for All campaign that Light for the World is holding in Ethiopia and Burkina Faso, but it will be used for some activities in Ethiopia. As I told you, inclusive education is very close to my heart, and even the remaining 50% will be going to establish a scholarship for girls with disabilities coming from rural areas in Ethiopia. As repeatedly said, education was my turning point in life, and as a girl with a disability, I wouldn't have been anybody had I not been educated. So I want to offer the best thing which happened to me in life, which is inclusive education to other people also. So I would be using the other money also to establish a scholarship for girls with disabilities coming from rural areas. As you know, most of disabled persons in Ethiopia live in the rural areas, but services are mostly saturated in the urban areas. So there is a mismatch between the demand and the supply. So I really want to bridge the gap between this supply and demand.
This was our portrait of Yetnebersh Nigussie, a strong and independent woman and a fighter for disability rights. For further information, please visit our website. This show was broadcasted on Radio Orange 94.0. Editors Martin Ladstätter, Katharina Mühlebner and Elisabeth Löffler. Technical support Markus Ladstätter.
Barrierefrei aufgerollt. Kurz, kompakt und leicht verständlich.